Alex walked into the bank branch on Ninth Street the way he always did. Head down, hoodie sleeves pulled over his knuckles, praying the line wasn't long. It was 37 minutes. He counted every one of them because there was nothing else to do but watch the clock above the teller windows and listen to someone's hold music leaking out of their phone 2 seats down. When his number finally buzzed on the screen, a teller named Whitney called his name without looking up from her monitor. Sign here, here, and here. She slid the paperwork back to him like she was passing a napkin across a counter. He said thanks, to nobody in particular. Then he left. 9 years later, Alex walked into a different branch in a different city, wearing a coat that actually fit him. He hadn't taken 3 steps past the door before a man in a navy suit was already crossing the lobby toward him. Hand out. Alex, great to see you. The usual? I'll have Emily bring it back to the office. The usual. Oat milk, no sugar. Nobody had asked him that in 9 years. They walked past the line, the exact kind of line Alex used to stand in, and into a private office with a door that actually closed behind them. No number buzzed. Nobody had to call his name. Somebody had simply been watching for him. Same bank, same Alex. Whatever had just walked into that lobby, it wasn't the same person who'd walked into the one on Ninth Street 9 years earlier. Except it was. It was exactly the same person. So what changed? Here's the uncomfortable part. Nobody ever sat Alex down and explained it. No letter, no form, no conversation. Somewhere, quietly, something had already decided who Alex was going to be treated as, long before he reached either desk. He just didn't know it yet. It took him almost a decade and one dead Honda to find out who. 9 years earlier, Alex was 24, splitting a 1-bedroom above a laundromat with a roommate he barely saw, working mornings at a distribution warehouse for $17.40 an hour. He wasn't broke exactly. He just never had more than about $400 of breathing room between him and whatever came next. Most mornings started the same way. A granola bar eaten standing at the counter, the banking app open on his phone before his eyes were even fully awake, checking the balance like it might have changed overnight out of sheer sympathy. It never had. Rent, gas, groceries, the whole arithmetic of getting by. And most months the math worked out to almost exactly zero. Not behind, not ahead. Just even. The way a tightrope walker is even, right up until something shifts underneath them. What came next was a Tuesday. His Honda made a sound he'd never heard a car make before, and something between a cough and a scream. And then it simply stopped starting. The mechanic quoted him $1,800. Alex had $340. He needed a loan, nothing dramatic, just enough to get back to the job that paid for the car in the first place. He'd always believed something simple about money, something his dad used to say across the kitchen table. Pay your bills on time. Don't buy what you can't afford. Play it straight, and the system plays it straight back. The bank wasn't good or bad. It was just a machine that read the rules and did what the rules said. That belief lasted exactly as long as it took a loan officer to read his file out loud. 602, she said. Not unkindly. Almost gently, actually. The way you'd read someone a weather report they weren't going to like. We can approve you. 19.2%. Alex did the math in his head and felt something drop in his stomach. Nearly 20% on a car loan for a car he needed just to keep the job that would eventually pay it off. Is there, he started, I don't know, a better option? Not at this score, she said. And that was the strange part. She wasn't being cruel. She wasn't judging him. She was reading a number off a screen the way you'd read somebody's height, a number somebody else had built, out of rules Alex had never seen and never agreed to. He signed anyway. What else was he going to do? Driving home, he told himself it wasn't a big deal. Bad luck, bad timing. One rough year. Next year would look different. He didn't call anyone that night. Didn't want to hear it said out loud yet, not even by himself. He almost missed what happened 4 months later. Almost. His coworker Desmond, same warehouse, same shift, a paycheck that looked almost identical to his own, mentioned over lunch between bites of a gas station burrito that he'd just refinanced his car loan. Same bank? Alex asked, already bracing for something worse than his own rate. Misery loves a witness. Yeah, 6'9", Desmond said. For a second, Alex almost didn't ask what his own rate had been. 19.2 had started to feel like something to hide, not just a number he'd signed. He laughed instead, assumed it had to be a joke. It wasn't a joke. Same income, more or less. Similar age. Roughly the same amount owed. A completely different number attached to it. Alex spent the rest of his shift turning it over, jaw tight, And it wasn't until he was walking home that he let himself ask the only question that actually mattered. Why Desmond, and not him? The answer, when he finally dug it out of Desmond over beers that weekend, had nothing to do with income at all. Desmond had opened a checking account at that same bank back when he was 19, barely used it, almost forgot it existed, and just let it sit there. 6 quiet years of a relationship the bank had been keeping score of the entire time, even while Desmond wasn't. Alex had no relationship with his bank at all. He had a transaction history. There's a difference, and nobody had ever told him that one existed. So Alex did something almost nobody tells you to do. He stopped treating the bank like a vending machine. Walk in, get cash, walk out, and started treating it more like a landlord he needed a good reference from. He opened a savings account he didn't need yet, moved his direct deposit over, left $400 sitting untouched, then $800, then $1,200, in an account he mostly just let breathe. None of it felt like progress. It felt like doing nothing on purpose and hoping somebody noticed. Somebody did. A letter he hadn't asked for, a pre-approved card with no annual fee, a real person on the phone instead of a robot. His score climbed 602, then 640, then 681, and at a hardware store buying a $200 drill for a side job, his card got approved in under 2 seconds flat. No hesitation, no silence while the machine thought it over. For one ridiculous second, it felt like winning something. He thought that was the whole story. It wasn't. Not even close. A few months later, feeling good, maybe a little invincible, Alex called about a small personal loan, $5,000 for a certification course that could bump his pay. He expected the same door to swing wide open. It swung about halfway. "You're right at the edge of our preferred tier," the woman on the phone told him cheerfully, like that was supposed to mean something. "A little more time, and you'll qualify." Edge of what? Nobody had ever mentioned a tier before. Alex hung up more confused than when he'd called, and for the first time it occurred to him that 681 might not be the finish line he thought it was. It might just be a different waiting room. 2 years after the Honda, Alex married a woman named Jenna in a backyard, folding chairs, a friend's Bluetooth speaker for music. A year after that, they found out a baby was coming, and for about 11 days, Alex forgot every number he'd ever memorized in his life. Then reality did what reality does. They found a house. Small, 2 bedrooms, a yard just big enough for the future they were imagining. They'd been saving. Score was 681. Hard won, respectable. Alex walked into the pre-approval meeting almost relaxed, which in hindsight should have worried him. It didn't go the way he expected. The number came back too tight to make the payment work. Not with Jenna cutting her hours before the baby, not with the 2 of them being newer to that score than the bank wanted them to be. 681 is good, the loan officer told him, kindly enough. But it's young. We'd want to see it held a while longer before we could get you where you need to be. Young. His own credit history apparently hadn't lived long enough yet to be trusted. He sat in the car in the parking lot for a while before he started the engine. Jenna didn't say anything, which was somehow worse than if she had. They drove home in a silence that had nothing to do with traffic. That night, lying awake, Alex kept running the same math over and over, like doing it one more time might change the answer. It never did. He wasn't angry at Jenna. He wasn't even sure he was angry at the bank anymore. He was angry at himself for believing that after the loan, after Desmond, after all of it, he'd finally caught up. He hadn't caught up. He'd just gotten better at being almost enough. For the first time since the Honda, Alex didn't feel curious about any of this. He just felt tired. It took him a few weeks to turn the tired into something useful, but he did. This time, he wasn't chasing a number to prove anything to anyone. He was done playing defense. The real shift didn't come until 3 years after that, after a promotion, after a second mortgage attempt that actually went through, when Alex and Jenna crossed a number he genuinely never expected to see attached to his own name. $40,000 sitting quietly across 2 accounts. That's when Emily called. Not a teller. Not a loan officer behind a partition. A relationship banker, her card said. And Alex remembers thinking that was a strange kind of job title, as if it was admitting right out loud that the rest of the customers didn't get a relationship at all. Just a number and a stranger reading it off a screen. Emily offered him something he hadn't known existed. No monthly fees. A direct line that skipped the hold music entirely. Preferred pricing on anything he might ever borrow again. An invitation to something called an investment strategy session, which Alex was fairly sure used to be a thing reserved for people who owned boats. He thought about that parking lot, about Young, about Jenna's silence in the passenger seat. "So what happens?" he asked Emily, only half joking, To people who don't have 40 grand? Emily paused, just a beat too long. They get excellent service, she said, which is the kind of sentence that answers a question by very carefully refusing to. Alex wasn't being served. He was being priced. He didn't say yes to any of it that day. But 6 weeks later, he found himself in a conference room 2 floors up, looking at an investment dashboard on a screen, bigger than his television. Numbers moving in green and red while an advisor walked him through something called an index fund. Like it was the most obvious idea in the world. On his way out, someone mentioned, almost in passing, that his new account tier came with airport lounge access. He didn't think much of it until 4 months later at the airport for a work trip, when a gate agent waved him through a curtain into a room with real plates and a bartender, quiet enough to hear yourself think. Free food. Nobody asked him a single question. He stood there holding eggs he hadn't paid for, and out of nowhere he thought about a layover 3 years earlier. The year of the baby, the year of the parking lot. Standing at a vending machine at 2 in the morning, feeding it crumpled dollar bills for a pack of crackers, because the flight was delayed and he hadn't wanted to spend money he and Jenna didn't have on the sit-down place by the gate. Same airport, maybe. He honestly couldn't remember which one. Nobody in this room knew that guy had ever existed. Alex almost didn't believe it himself. Which brings us back to that office. The navy suit at the door. The coffee, oat milk, no sugar, already on the desk before he'd even sat down. Emily across from him, the way she always was now. Alex hadn't planned to ask. It just came out somewhere between the small talk and the paperwork. "So," he said, "when did you decide to treat me differently?" Emily smiled. The same careful smile from 9 years and one whole life ago. "We didn't," she said. Silence. Alex almost argued. Some part of him already knew there was nothing to argue with. The bank hadn't changed a single thing about how it saw him. He had changed what he was worth to it. 9 years he'd spent thinking the finish line was a good rate. A private office, someone remembering his coffee order. It wasn't. The real finish line, the one nobody puts on a billboard, is the day your money starts making more money sitting still than your paycheck ever did standing up. The day a loan stops being a lifeline and becomes something you can simply say no to. He wasn't there yet, but for the first time, he could see the shape of it, and that was its own kind of unsettling. Through the glass wall of the office, out of the corner of his eye, Alex noticed a kid, maybe 23, standing in the regular line, hoodie sleeves pulled over his knuckles, watching the clock above the teller windows the exact way Alex once had. Nobody had called his name yet. Alex knew, in a way he couldn't fully explain, exactly how long that line was going to feel from the inside. He wanted to walk over. Say something. It isn't personal, he wanted to tell him. It never was. He didn't get up. Emily slid a folder across the desk and Alex signed where he always had. Except this time, someone had waited for him to finish his coffee first. On the way out, he passed close enough to the kid to nod, once. The kid nodded back, confused, polite, the way you nod at a stranger. The door closed behind Alex before he could change his mind about anything. The bank hadn't changed. It never had. It had only ever been asking the same quiet question, every single time anyone walked through its doors. How valuable are you to us?